Hello, my name is Carole Maatz. I have lived in Strongsville all my life and in the same house. Can you believe it? And this is my story. This year we are celebrating Strongsville's 200th birthday. What a change I have seen just in my lifetime. Through the years, I have met newcomers to our city, and they ask me, "What was it like, Carole, living here on a farm?" Even with a family name on the horse barn, they can't picture a large dairy farm with cows walking up and down the road from the barn to the pasture every spring to winter time. In the picture, we see the cows, and they are at the corner of Preem and Albion Road, where now sits the Fire Station 3. Now, let's hear about a little family history. It began when my grandmother and grandfather came to, no, it was my grandfather, Frederick Carl Maatz, came to Strongsville in the late 1860s from Großkotten, Germany. He is on the left-hand side there in the picture, and he was followed by his bride-to-be, Amelia Kruger, pictured on the right, whom he married in the German Methodist Church in Berea. Today, it is the BW Chapel. My grandfather worked in the Berea quarries before renting several farms in Strongsville. One was on South Marks Road off of 82, and the other farm was on Royalton Road near our railroad tracks in Strongsville. He then purchased the 123-acre farm, Lot 88, on West Albion Road, where I live today. In the picture here, you see the home as it appears today and the back area of the home. After Frederick's passing, that's my grandfather, the farm was run by my dad, pictured here. He was the youngest of 5 Maatz children, and my dad, pictured here, was born where I live today. Here we see an aerial view taken of the farm, I would say the whole farm property. And you see back there, well, first of all, you see the Albion Road there, which you're all familiar with. And then if you look on the left-hand corner up there, you'll see the runway. Well, we did have a Strongsville airport. Many of you probably didn't know that. But in the picture, going back to Albion Road, you see your flat parts and then you see the others. The flat means that's crops growing there. And in the right-hand corner is all the wooded section that, by the way, is still there today. Here's another view I take standing in the northeast corner of the property, looking toward the property. That probably is a cornfield. That probably was taken around October or something like that. Oh, and here is the farm. We call this the model farm. It was crafted by my brother who lives in Palm Harbor, Florida today. This was done in 2003. This particular display can be found up at the Strongsville Historical Society. If you notice, looks just like what it should, because can you imagine he did that according to scale? As he lived in Florida, he didn't even need the measurements of the barn. He just did it. He did ask my other brother to give him the measurements for the house. And so they are identical as where they were years before we moved the silos away. Our picture here is one that one hardly sees. It's the back part of the 2 barns. Most people think there's just one barn there. There's a horse barn on the front closest to the road, and then the other. It's sort of like in an L formation. However, the right picture is taken on the pathway from the house to the barn. You see the little pathway I'd shoveled there? That gives you some idea of how much snow that we get sometimes. Now, more family history. Do you notice in the upper left-hand corner, this is the area in the farm that my grandfather left before he came to America. It was a very large farm, 1,000 acres, but he wanted to go to America, so he came. However, these two ladies in the right-hand corner, they were the ones that started here for started to come here first. The one on the right is my grandmother's sister. The one on the left is my grandmother. So the grandmother's sister, she was the older one, and she was more, I guess, venturous. And she came in the early 1860s with her husband, August Katz, K-A-A-T-Z. And guess where their farm was? On the corner of Drake and Pearl. Amelia Kruger, their maiden name was Kruger. Amelia Kruger came in the late 1860s. She's on the left there. That is my grandmother. And she came, followed Frederick Maatz, who had come a little bit earlier. She followed him here and married him. And he and that's become the Maatz farm right here on Albion Road. Now, a little bit different here. Henrietta, that's the one on the right, her daughter became Mrs. May Rowe. Her home is in the Strongsville Historic Village. It's the one that sits right there on Pearl Road. Amelia's daughter, that would be my Aunt May, married Irving Killian, and their farm was on the southwest corner of Prospect and Drake Road. And guess what he built for her as a wedding gift? He built her a Queen Anne home, and guess where it stood? Right at the corner of Drake and Prospect. If you know, the area is where the Pathway Church is located today. That was part of their farm. And it was not a dairy farm, it was a grape farm that extended north on the west side of Prospect, way past the fire station. I do not know how deep the property was where the industrial park is, but you have some idea their farm extended from Drake Road at least past the fire station. The two ladies sitting here are seated, believe it or not, outside the Queen Anne home, which sat at the corner of Drake and Prospect on the southwest corner. Their married names are very similar. One was Maatz, M-A-A-T-Z, and Henrietta's was K-A-A-T-Z, both coming from the same town in Germany. Now we have heard about the two sisters. Well, look what happened. Can you believe in August 1916, 100 years ago? This is the Maatz reunion picture down Albion Road. See how the two families have grown. And look at the clothes. I don't have any idea why they're all wearing white, even the little ones in the front row. And by the way, my grandfather is in the middle there with a dark vest on. That is Grandpa Maatz. Now, here is the new 1893 Maatz home, and it's being enjoyed here by the grandparents, Frederick and Amelia Maatz, and their son Arthur. Grandfather, imagine, built this home. And listen to what I'm going to say now. The lumber from the woods north of my house across Albion Road, where their beautiful trees are standing today, that's where the lumber came for this home. I don't know how they did that. I don't know how they got it there. It amazes me. Amazes me that they were able. Now, take a look closely. You see there's a little bit of a porch there on the front, but not once. That is not what my house looks like today. So we'll see that in another picture. While we're looking at this picture, my grandfather paid to get the telephone line down Albion Road from Prospect. A telephone was installed in this house in 1902. Gas lighting and heating came in 1926. Now we see 1890s still the photo of the original barn on the Maatz farm. Part of that's still there today, but it doesn't look the same. So in those early days, lanterns were used in the barn. Pictured here are Frank Annick, who was our farm hand, and then my dad, and then his parents, Frederick and Amelia Maatz. Now, I said they're not going to take that farm away, but they added to it. Notice the roof line. This is a 1930s photo of the original barn with a longer revamped roof line, making room for more cows. And he also added three silos, 30-foot silos to store the silage, which was used, of course, to feed the cows on this large farm. Keep in mind, those silos were very, very high, and I actually walked up one of those silos. There's a track inside it. It's like a stairway. And I got to the top. I was forbidden to do it, but I did. And I could see out of the top of those silo window the terminal tower in Cleveland. Terminal Tower in Cleveland. I'll never forget that, but I never told my parents what I did because I was told never to walk up. And the silo was empty, which meant I would have been killed if I had fallen. Okay, now this gives you a good comparison picture. There's that old farm before the silos were added. Also, the roof is entirely different until they elongated it. And then, of course, the bottom picture on the right is the way it looks today. And of course, you always have a corn crib and a hen house. That's what it was called, a hen house. Didn't say anything about the roosters. That's the corn crib right there, and then also the hen house. Here we have the family portrait, probably the first one. It amazes me that they had a portrait like this done. I don't know where they went to do it, perhaps in Berea, but I'm sure there wasn't anything in Strongsville. My dad is right there in the right-hand corner. Isn't he a good-looking guy? Then his older brother up there on the left in the top line, and of course, then next to him is Jenny, my Aunt Jenny, and she's the one that married a doctor and moved out of Strongsville when she was young. Now, the bottom people there, well, on the far left is my grandfather, of course. Then next to him is the only daughter that left the area. She had to, for health reasons of her husband, moved to Florida. So she lived in Lake Worth all her life. Now, the one in the middle, she's the one that lived at the corner of Drake and Prospect Road, Killian Farm. Remember I said it was a grape farm. So that's my Aunt May, and then of course my dad on the far right. Now, let's go back to the house here. We're still in the late 1890s, and you still don't have a porch on the front of the house. And guess who wanted a porch? My grandma. And she finally got it. She got it. They built a porch on it. You'll see in later pictures. So in those days, the horses were their, you might say, pets, because in those days, horses were needed for everything they did on the farm. Today, we more or less are cat and dog people. And that's the same view of the house that was just before. Now the porch is there. However, it was this view here was taken, and it was like 126 years later. This house looks like this with a porch. But the porch, don't misunderstand me, the porch was added probably around the early 1900s. Our family always got together on Thanksgiving Day. Here we are with the 5 grown-up Maatz children and their cousin, Mrs. Rowe, who was raised on the farm, remember, at Pearl and Drake Road. All of these in this picture rest today in Strongsville Cemetery between Section A and B, except my Aunt M, who is right, well, she's the second from the left. And she went to Florida, and that is where she remained. The Maatz farm goes back to the horse and buggy days and remained a working farm for over a century. I still have the 1880s drop front Phaeton buggy, which used to take this family to social events at the Strongsville Town Hall, at the center. Yes, I said center. The center of town was called the center, not the commons as it is referred to now. Center Middle School took its name from the center, as did the first telephone exchange, Center 8 or CE8, which is the exchange I have in my telephone number. Going on, I restored the Albany sleigh. And what was this used for? It was used to take the kids to school. If you can imagine that, taking kids to school in the sleigh. You'll see these later in our pictures. The sleigh took them over the fields to Vigil School, located near the railroad tracks at Depot Road, now Westwood Drive, and Prospect Road. Let me explain the name Vigil. It was called Vigil School because if you stepped out of the school, you were right near the railroad tracks, and the students had to be very vigilant. I also want to mention here that where I live, and I think most of you do, where I live on Albion Road, there wasn't another house from my house to Vigil, which is the corner of Prospect and uh, Westwood Drive. So imagine they took the kids in the sleigh that you will see in a few pictures from now. They took the kids in that sleigh over the fields. There weren't any houses along Prospect there. It was a clear sweep from there. Of course, a lot of our farm went back there too, because our farm went up to where the Strongsville Airport was in later years. Now we begin our interesting story about the vehicles that they had to use to go somewhere. Remember, there were no automobiles. I'm talking about that type of time. So, restoration of the actual vehicles used by my family appear in these pictures that you're going to see. These are the vehicles they had to go to church in. And they went to church in Brea because the sermons were in German for the folks. And then to Strongsville because they wanted their children to go to Strongsville where it was in English. They took these vehicles to the town hall for town meetings. Imagine on a Saturday afternoon going to the Strongsville town hall for tea and cookies, I guess, for a little social hour. All of this was before the automobile. That's the only way they could get around. The buggy and the sleigh in the top picture there became the small sleigh and the buggy in the bottom picture. Both vehicles had been in my barn since the 1880s. Woodland Coach of Millersburg, Ohio, restored both of them in 2003. I checked, I think it took them 7 months to restore both vehicles. And now we're going to see, or what I wanted to show you was the pictures here of the buggy, and that in those days was like a Cadillac today. It was called a drop front because that was a special name, and it was built a certain way. The drop front Phaeton buggy at the top there, then over on the right is the same thing with the top down. And here we see myself and my brothers in Grandma's buggy right in front of the barn, perhaps about 10 years ago. Now here's another picture. The sleigh on the right is how it looked when we took it out of the barn. On the left is after it was restored. The next part is take a good look at the sleigh. The sleigh shows in these pictures the same color and the original artwork, just as it appeared on the sleigh in the 1880s. The man who did the sleigh restoration told me they took all the paint off originally, and they were able to see the type of pictures or of those various things on the sleigh, and they restored it with the very same thing. They followed the pattern and did it just like it was. So they were in my garage there or in front of the garage. Here I am in the old sleigh, looking pretty good. But that was used in the Sun newspapers, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 years ago. And here's my dear brother who passed recently. These pictures were taken in my garage where they live today. I'm in the left picture, and my brother Don is in the right. Okay, so much for the restoration of the sleigh and the buggy. Here is my house, the front view in the spring and then in the fall, or in the snow time, in the winter. I wanted to make you aware of the type of lightning rods that they have on the house, and they are still there today. You could probably see them faintly in the snow picture. They are antique lightning rods, the same that were put on by my grandfather. They have blue and white globes, maybe about 6 inches from the top, these big blue and white globes. They still adorn the gable roof of the house. That gable roof means it's a point. Like this one here, there is your gable type of roof. And believe me, that's a hard roof to put a roof on. You know, all the men don't care for that type of roof, but it keeps the water rose freely. Okay, so much for that. Now we'll go on to the porch on this house. Here I am at the porch where I go in every day, and the plaque there on the porch is 1893 Strongsville Historical Society. Going back a few years, the address for the farm was West Albion Road, RFD number 2, Berea, Ohio, but we lived in Strongsville, and no one had a house number. The telephone number was 58F11, which meant you answered when you heard 2 rings. You had to call the operator to even make a call. Finally, we received the Center 8 exchange and dialing. This was great. For many years, our house was the only house between Prospect and Preem Road. Remember I told you our farm goes way down to Preem Road there. Albion Road was gravel, then blacktop, and now concrete. Today, I live in the same Victorian farmhouse built by my grandparents in 1893. They used gas, kerosene, and candles to light the house. Here are some examples. The one on the left is a type of a lantern that they would hang on their wagon. The one in the middle is in my house. It was an old kerosene lamp that I had electrified. And the one on the far right is the first fixture when electric lights were put in the house. Here is a late 1950s photo looking east on Albion Road from Preem Road. The entrance to the day pasture was right near the corner of Preem Road. Here you see the cows resting almost way up by the barn. I used to go down Albion Road to almost the corner of Preem Road, where the entrance was, and open the gate and bring the cows up the road. People used to get so upset with me because I had cows going up. Get those cows off of the road. But my dad said, don't pay attention to them. He said, they don't know about farmers and what we have to do. He says, just forget it. Anyhow, going back before 1931, milk was taken by a bobsled up Albion to Johnson Corners, which was at Prospect and Albion. From there, the milk was shipped on the Cleveland Southwestern Electric. Until a few years ago, one could find the same old tracks in their along Prospect Road. The track ran to Brea and on to Cleveland. My brother was a builder in Strongsville, and his home that he built was south of 82 on Prospect. And when he first built his home there, I was beyond Lund Road, he saw tracks that were left from the old Southwestern Electric. I remember at the time they were in the property in the front, which would be his front lawn. My dad was a dairy farmer for 60 years and one of the first dairymen to ship milk to Cleveland by the Cleveland Southwestern. Of course, eventually, big trucks came and picked up our milk at the farm every morning at 8 o'clock, so that was why you had to have your milk ready. They returned the empty cans the next morning, and of course, we had to have a number on our cans so we didn't get mixed up with others. 102 was the number on our milk cans. Today, as I said before, right down the corner, if you can imagine, just the corner there at Preem Road, that today is the location of the fire station number 3. Living on a dairy farm requires a real commitment by a family. Chores are always the same. Every day of the year, twice a day, at 5 a.m. and 5 p.m., you must milk the cows and also feed them. That means no vacations and no one-day trips. Holidays are the same as weekdays. Cows must be kept on schedule to produce the best and most milk. Breakfast was after milking, 7:30. The same schedule at the 5 p.m., then supper. One big meal. We didn't call it lunch, it was called dinner. So we had one big meal. Dinner was at 12:30. Twice a year, if we were lucky, we left home late on a Saturday morning, and we were back for the 5 p.m. milking on Sunday. We visited my dad's brother and wife in Clyde, Ohio, where he later became mayor. This was the farthest I and my brothers had ever been from home until after Strongsville graduation. When grandparents managed the farm, they raised a young boy from the Brea orphanage. He loved living and working on our farm and did so until he married. In the 1920s, the Maatz dairy farm implemented automated processes for milk production with electronic milking machines. That had never been done before. You had to milk the cows by hand, but we had 40 cows and that would take too long. This certainly, with this type of equipment, cut down on milking time. Looking at the picture here, which I crafted this project here showing this electronic process. You see the milker in the gray can part there, and then this is where the milk will end up after leaving the cow. On the top of the milker is the pulsator, which connects teats, shells, and inflations, which carry the milk from the cow to that milker. Remember, it's going to come from the cow, and then it's going into that gray part. Then, so it gets to the milker there. Then it goes to the strainer, and I don't think in this picture you see the strainer. Then finally into the milk can. Dad operated one of the largest dairy farms remaining in Cuyahoga County. And I would just like to say here for a minute, the pulsator, which is what I have my hand on, if you don't have a pulsator, you can't connect all the other things that are needed. I thought I had all the equipment when I made this display, and I couldn't find the pulsator. I got on the computer and called, I think, every dairy farm in the country, and nobody had a pulsator. Then I called my nephew, Don Jr., and I told him about it. I said, is there something I could get to use here instead? And he says, well, wait a minute. He says, I have a little thing downstairs. I said, what is it? He says, I don't know. So he goes downstairs. Now he lives in Michigan, and he is a young fella, but he's was in the Navy, and then after school went to Ohio State. So here he has some little thing he wants to tell me about. So he comes to the phone and he says, "Does it?" I said, "What's it look like?" He says, "It has an name Empire Milking on it." I said, "Empire Milking? Don, that's our pulsator from I need that on my display." And he said, I said, "How long have you had that?" He said, "My dad gave it to me when I was 5 years old." And you see, Don never saw the cows in operation or the farm in operation, so he didn't know anything about these things. Isn't that something? He had the pulsator I was looking for. And why did my dad give it to him? My brother give it to him? I guess he thought it was a little toy and he used it and he took it with him no matter where he moved. That little toy went with him. He didn't know what it was. It was a pulsator. It's only about a little bit bigger than a hand when your fingers are put together. I thought that was an interesting story. About 1930, my dad, of course, didn't have enough to do on the farm. He had to build the Orchard Hill greenhouse on South Boone Road in Columbia Station that was located off of 82 in Lorain County. In the 1930s to the 1960s, Lorain County had more greenhouses than anywhere else in the world. If you drive today through Lorain County, you will see greenhouses. However, most are gone now, or they have changed and they grow flowers instead of what we did. Our greenhouse had 4 acres under glass, and that's what you see in the left-hand picture. The part there in the middle is where you drive in and so forth. But 4 acres under glass, that's a lot. And that's Boone Road going along in front of it and so forth. But I would just like to say here, that's where I learned to roller skate, was in my dad's greenhouse because the service center had a big concrete floor where they packed tomatoes, and I couldn't skate on those round circles that were my sidewalk at home like you got from the Berea quarries. I said to my dad, "I need a new sidewalk." He said, "You come over to the greenhouse with me. You can skate till you're blue in the face." So that's where I did my roller skating. We finally did change the sidewalk. So if you come visit me, I don't have the round circles anymore. Guess who became the one and only fireman at my dad's greenhouse? The answer is the former farmhand that my grandparents took from the orphanage in Berea. Remember, he was raised on our farm, and when he got married, he had to leave, of course. And then and in those days when we built the greenhouse, they had a stoker, which required coal, and then from that they went to gas. And then gas became so expensive that's why a lot of the greenhouses in Columbia Station went out of business because the price of gas was very, very high. And so most of the greenhouses sold out in around the 60s and 70s. As I said, you still see some today, but most of them have gone into flowers. They don't, because it takes too much to heat these greenhouses in the winter time. All right, now we're going to back to the farm, and here I am on the tractor, and we need hay to feed all these cows. And in this picture, this is the older equipment we used on the farm because you see Dad up on the wagon with my brother Don, and I had to drive the tractor. This is before we got our baler. So when you had to do it this way, this was the old-fashioned way. If you notice here, you see the hay has been raked up and it's come up on the wagon there. They're loading the wagon. Then you have to haul it back to the barn where the hay is pulled off the wagon with a huge fork. I mean huge. It must be 6, 8 feet big. Whew. And you push that down into the hay and it pulls a whole bunch up into the barn with a rope and pulley. Then I would trip the rope and the hay falls into the mow. A mow is the storage place in the barn for the hay, usually on the second floor. We were so happy when Dad bought a baler that you could go out in the field and bale the hay right in the field, and then it would be tossed on the wagon. The wagon took the bales home for storage in the mow, so that what you didn't have all that loose hay in the mow. You had bales of hay. All right. Oh, let's see. That's a lot easier than pitching hay with a fork. Believe me, I did a lot of that. The scythe and rake from our farm is displayed in the Strongsville Historic Village. And an interesting note here, I might say, is hay must be completely dry when taken from the field. Sometimes we had to do haying after the chores were done because it didn't get dry enough during the day. You never want to put wet hay in the barn because it can smolder and of course burn and smoke, and you will have a problem of losing your barn. So you've got to be very, very careful. Okay, another thing here is soybean harvesting. Of course, this was after we had sold the cows, but we still had the land. In 1959, after the cows were sold, all the land was used for soybeans. Pictured here with the truck across from the house. They're shown harvesting here. Another activity on the farm shows in the late 1940s a photo of my dad riding the oat binder harvester on the north side of Albion. The harvester ties the oats into bundles which are later stacked into neat shocks in the field, ready for hauling to the barn for threshing. Whoa, threshing day is a real fun day for kids. Also, very much of a work day for my mother. What does threshing do? It separates the ripened grain from the straw or husk. This is always done in August, and as I say, it's a big day for Mom too, because she has to have a big meal. The evening before threshing, though, the kids would sit on our front porch and wait for the threshing machine to come down Albion. You could hear the machine when it turned the corner at Prospect. We usually had 6 to 8 men from the neighborhood come to help and be here for dinner at noon. What a dinner Mom and I prepared. We started baking pies after breakfast. Apple and maybe blackberry or elderberry pie if I had gone picking the day before. I had to add 3 or 4 leaves to the kitchen table, which is still in my kitchen today. Yes, I have a large kitchen, so it worked to see all those men sitting at the table. I also have the same chairs and sideboard in the kitchen. One of my jobs was to take water to the men and make sure they didn't get thirsty. And before they ate, I always had to set up a wash table outside for the men with soap, towels, and more water. Our dinner consisted of usually a big beef roast, potatoes, and always gravy. Always could make the best gravy. Now I've never made it. I haven't made it in years. And then we'd have corn if it's ripe, bread and butter pickles made from our cucumbers in the greenhouse, and Mom's homemade bread. Oh, was that good. And a couple side dishes, applesauce, tomatoes and cukes from the greenhouse, and of course beverage. And threshing day was always in August. Potatoes were planted in June, usually had about 15 acres to 20 acres. Mom and I helped cut potatoes for planting, and that was a real job. You didn't just sit there with a paring knife. My dad had invented a potato cutter that was a large, narrow wooden box, and he slanted it forward and set it on wooden legs. I wish I had a picture of it today. Person in a chair would face the narrow side of the box with the knife coming up through a board right in front of you. Now, in order to cut the potatoes, you open the sliding door to allow the potatoes to come out. And you would hold the potato in your hand, and then you would pull the potato forward toward the knife, and then pull it right through and have it come right through the knife, and then you'd cut your potatoes. After school, Every September we had to pick up new potatoes. Oh, was that a job every day time. We had to load the wagons and take them home for storage in the basement. And by the way, you might be interested to know the potatoes filled our basement of our house. And that was why we didn't have a furnace until Dad built a storage building in 1945. And one year we had so many potatoes that we had to take part of the garage and put potatoes in there. And of course, our garage wasn't heated, so he took this little stove here, you see, put it in the garage, and that kept the potatoes from freezing. You know, potatoes were very important in those days. I think we had potatoes for twice a day for dinner and supper. But after Dad got the potatoes in for the winter, he would sort potatoes during the day. That means he would sort them out for the stores, and then he would, of course, take them to Cleveland, and they'd be sold in the stores. Now, an important activity on the farm is silo filling. Perhaps some of you don't know what a silo is, and we'll get to that in a minute. Now, this is right across the street from my house, and that's a big cornfield. And you see the woods in the back? That's where the wood for my house came from. And by the way, that woods is still there today, but it's got houses intermingled in it. So that is a nice cornfield. I wish it looked like that still today, but it doesn't. Okay, these are the shocks of the corn. We have to, well, let's see, it involves a corn binder. It's pulled by a tractor, and then it cuts, and then separates the corns into shocks, and then they are tied together with twine. You have probably seen them standing in the field, waiting to be picked up and hauled back to the farm. Now, what is a silo filler? And here we see a silo filler. It's probably 12 feet long. And you see from the silo filler, you have a pipe that extends way up to the top window. The top window must be open. And of course, as soon as that goes up the pipe, it is cut in, the corn is all cut into nice little pieces, of course. It goes up into the window and it drops down inside. And of course, it's going to be at the bottom first. And so after my dad would always, let's see, I missed a little bit of it here. After the wagon pulls up to the silo filler, the shocks are pulled off the wagon and they are dropped carefully on this moving track of chains, which carry each shock to the mouth of cutting blades. My dad would always stand by the blade entrance and guide the shocks into the cutting blades, which then forces the corn and cuts it up and shoots it up in that pipe that I was talking about. And the corn now is called silage. That's a new name for the cow's food. So the silage now falls down into the silo, and it will stay there all winter until, and the silos were always filled, 3 of them, and that would feed all of those cows from, let's say October through to maybe April. But the thing I want to tell you about here is when that silo is filled and goes down and blown in there, it goes into the silo inside. Somebody, it was usually one of my brothers, had to be in that silo and tramp it down. If you didn't tramp it down, it would become a big, big pile, and pretty soon it would be up at the top. And you couldn't get any more in. You'd have a couple loads of corn, but you're already filled. So you had to tramp it down. And also, if you didn't tramp it down, it would ferment and not be good for the cows. So that was an important thing to remember. Okay, you notice the 3 silos on that. The third silo I was going to mention in the 1965 tornado in Strongsville, that little silo, and I think you can see it here in that left-hand picture up there, that was blown over a little bit, not all the way, because in April, by that time they'd eaten all the silage and the silo was empty, and even though it was cabled into the ground, it did go over slightly. But not too long after that, and of course we now didn't have any cows anyhow, We took the silos down, and then the farm barn looked like the one at the bottom. However, the one thing that we did take down too is the lean-to. The lean-to is that little shed there that's attached to the horse barn. The horse barn is the one that has the pointed cable on it. Okay, so that gives you an idea of what silo filling was, and it was usually done by our family. We didn't need any extra men as long as we had our hired hand. But it did take 2, 3 weeks to get all 3 silos filled for the winter. The Maatz dairy farm was no longer a dairy farm by the late 1950s when only the cows were sold. The acreage for the corn, oats, hay, and potatoes was turned over to soybeans and more hay for all the horse farms around Strongsville. In 1976, the Maatz farm on West Albion Road, Strongsville, was the only century farm remaining in Cuyahoga County as researched by the National Bicentennial Committee. My mom, this is, I believe, a studio picture of her, probably before her marriage. She was a Brea girl and worked as a telephone operator when she was a young girl. And her grandfather was also from Germany, and so we have a real German heritage here. I would like to say that her daily schedule was really something I wonder about. I thought maybe you'd be interested. Every Monday we had to wash. I had to wash, and Tuesday we had to iron. I know people don't do that any day, but we did. Wednesday you had to mend. Does anybody mend today? I don't know. Mend and pick up the loose ends around the place. Thursday you cleaned upstairs. Friday you cleaned downstairs. And Saturday you did the kitchen and the bathroom and the pantry. We had a big pantry in our house. And I want to mention this. How many people do this today? Every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, she baked 6 loaves of bread. And we ate it all. And there were 6 in the family because I said the hired man, that little boy, he became a big boy. He lived with us, he had a room with us, and he lived with us, and my mother washed for him and fed him and everything. So 6 loaves of bread every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. Oh, on Saturday she made special kuchen. That was really, really great. My mother did not have an easy life when I look at how we have things, and part of it was because, in those days we didn't have city water, and you probably have never lived when you didn't have city water, but it made living a lot harder. We never could have a automatic washing machine and dryer. That was never anything. I never had it until 1975. That's when they brought city water down Albion Road. So as I look back, life was harder, much harder for my mom, and less convenient than for women today. Imagine no city water down Albion Road until approximately 1975. What did we use? We had wells and cisterns. If the well went dry or if the cistern went dry, you didn't get the bath that night. And Dad had to take a truck and go and get water and bring it and put it in our cistern. A cistern is a place where the water will run off the roof and it goes into the cistern. So that was very important that you kept your gutters in good shape or you wouldn't get anything in the cistern. We had 3 wells on the place. One was only one working. The others were, I guess, not, water wasn't good in. So we had 1 well on our place. And I was going to mention about the on Monday, the washing. If it rained on Monday, that meant you had to get your washing in some other day when it wasn't raining. And can you imagine all the overhauls on the line and all those things for farming? It wasn't an easy time without city water, believe me. and it meant you hang your clothes outside and or in the attic i- during winter time, where sometimes they froze. If you wanted something, mother would say, "Well, go up in the attic. Maybe you get it off the line." And so the boys would, the boy, the boys were always asking mom for, "Do I have any socks? Any clean socks?" She says, "Go up to the attic," and they go up to the attic, and they were frozen stiff. So they'd come down and soften up there. That was always some of the things that we had to do. And there's a place that she had a rack hanging in the kitchen where she could put some of the things there where they would feel the heat of the stove. Oh, I forgot about our black stove. We had a black cooking stove in our house when I was a kid, a black cooking stove. It went right along with the stove that we had in the living room. Remember I told you about the potatoes going in the basement? Well, what did we heat with? We had a round black stove in the living room, and that was for the entire house. And I believe me, we never were cold in that house. Never, never cold, even though we only had a round black stove in the living room. Then a big black one in the kitchen with a heating oven on the side. I think, okay, I think we're up to canning now. Canning was very popular, but very time consuming. Look what we canned 200 quarts of applesauce. Luckily, I had my grandma's apple peeler that I could use. I didn't have to peel it with a paring knife. We had cukes from the greenhouse for pickles, and my favorite was bread and butter. Oh, I love bread and butter. We had grapes, peaches, and berries to make jam with, as well as elderberry and so forth. We had a very large orchard behind our house. And some differences, I would say, were especially the appliances that we have today. We didn't have those years ago. They were very, very convenient. And only one car in the family and one truck. They had to do for everybody. So that tells you a little bit about living on a real farm. Oh, as you know, my family dates way back in Strongsville, and here's a typical schoolroom with kids, and Mrs. Rowe is on the far left. She was their teacher. See where she was put. And my Aunt Jenny is right next to her. Remember, they're cousins. And then my dad is over on the far right. I can't tell you how old they were because in those days they had several grades into one. But that's one of the school pictures from Strongsville. Oh, guess who these little ones are? Huh. Here's my brother and I waiting for the bus, at the same mailbox. They're at the same place as the mailbox is today. And you see the tall corn? So this, is September. The corn has not been cut yet for the silos. There it is. And, well, school was also very different at that time. And even though I enjoyed it, we didn't think we were missing anything because everybody around Strongsville lived either on a little farm or their father was a fireman or something. And so we didn't have much entertainment, but we didn't know we were missing anything. So we'll go on now to the school days about a little bit more. My brothers had to get up and do the chores before going to school. We all took the bus to and from school. However, we were the first ones on in the morning and the last ones off at night. And that was really a long ride because it used to go down Preem Road, Marks Road, and all around the town. But anyhow, it was a long ride. But I used to change my socks. My dad always wanted to make sure I didn't get rheumatism. So he said he didn't ever want me to wear little socks like some of the girls did. He always wanted my legs covered because rheumatism was in our family. And he thought keeping them covered in the cold. So I used to run out of the house from the barn where he'd see me, and I'd have the long socks on. I'd get in the bus, I'd go in the back and change my socks. Isn't that crazy? And then coming home, I'd take them off because we were the last ones off. I'd go in the back, and the mayor he never told on me. He never told Carole changes her socks. Okay. But anyhow, My dad had a lot of relatives, and so did Mrs. Rowe and some of them in the family. So you see, he was trying to make sure I didn't get it. Okay, the bus was driven by Mayor Bean. How about that? For any after activities, we had to get a ride or walk home. There was no picking up like they do today. The older brother was on the basketball team. However, Mom had to go pick him up because he was needed for milking. I was a cheerleader and I walked home. I walked one day through Albion, so down Pearl Road to Albion, and there were no houses there, but I met something else. I met a blue racer snake. I'm telling you, right near the railroad tracks, and I ran home non-stop. Next time I decided after practice I'll walk down Depot Road. Remember that's now Westwood. So I walked down Depot Road and then down Prospect and then Albion. So I felt more safe walking that way. Now, I went to school in the old high school building right there on Pearl Road. However, we don't have it anymore. It was taken down in July. And this was a school for 1 through 6. That's where I went to elementary school, 1 through 6. And we did not have kindergarten. I never had kindergarten. It wasn't offered. And remember, when I was there, this is a much older picture than when I went to school there, of course. But of course, if you'd walk out of the back there, you'd go into was the Center Middle School. Well, the Center Middle School, without the addition, was grades 7 through 12. However, when it came to the cafeteria, the lady, Mrs. Ruby Bedford, she had a cook for all grades 1 through 12. So the cafeteria for all 12 grades was in the basement of this school, which at that time was the elementary school. Ruby Bedford was our cook, and I'll never forget her. She was a wonderful person. All right. In school, I was very active in anything musical. We performed Gilbert and Sullivan's Pinafore and their Pirates of Penzance. I played in the marching band and concert band. Piano accompanist was choir. For the choir, I was. I graduated top of my class and spoke at commencement. After graduation, I worked as a secretary for Cutler Hammer in Cleveland. I took the Berea bus into Cleveland every day. And you got the Berea bus down at the corner of Sprague and Prospect. So then I started attending Baldwin Wallace Conservatory of Music. And while attending BW, I worked during the summer at NACA, which today is NASA. After my career as a music teacher, I was pleased to be honored at BW as an outstanding educator. I'm pictured here with my late brother, who attended the reception and luncheon that day. Also on the right, I'm pictured with the college president at the time, Richard Durst. I received my master's degree while I was teaching. I went to New York every summer and finished my master's degree. That was sort of. After my career, I visited my paternal relatives in Germany. In 1993, they came to Strongsville, and Mayor Ehrenfeld, who also has German heritage, arranged a tour of Strongsville for them. We are pictured here in the Strongsville Council chambers. That is my brother on the far right, and you can see me there in the white slacks. And all the others were the German relatives. There were 9 of them, and they were here for 10 days. Of course, my relatives wanted to see where my grandma lived in Strongsville. Here I am in my house, sitting on her fainting couch in her parlor. Yes, I had the fainting couch restored. I had found it in the barn. Also, in this particular room in my house, which is called the parlor. I have an 1890s pump organ. I had everything restored just like I did with the buggy and the sleigh that you saw in previous pictures. Speaking of company, years ago everybody liked to sit on their porch. That's why Grandma wanted a porch built on her home there where I live today. Here I see here are some pictures of porches in my house and how they were used. Here you see me on the front porch, and the house had just been painted and so forth. And here I am on the back porch. This is the steps and the door that I come in every day. And these are the most recent pictures taken in May of this year of the homestead. Finally, we come to the end of this presentation. The 3 kids years ago, and here we are today sitting on the couch in my living room. My brother Don is in the middle, the one that passed away, and the other one is in Florida. A few pics from the house here. If I want to mention here, I'll start in the upper right left-hand corner. That used to be the summer kitchen. Yes, there was an actual building called the summer kitchen. That's where they did all their canning because it was too hot in the regular house. Remember, this is before air conditioning. And so they had the summer kitchen, and that picture was painted before we took it down. It was beginning to fall apart. In my house, you see right next to that picture is the old bedroom upstairs with a bed reaching almost to the ceiling in the picture, and then on the side you see the pictures of the 3 of us kids when we graduated from Strongsville High School. Oh, that you can actually see a better picture of that if you go to the left in the middle picture. And there below that picture is the fainting couch that I had restored. Remember, you saw a picture of me sitting on it. And then going to your right, you see the old 1890s pump organ. I used to play on it. That's how I became interested in music. I used to play until my father said, I can't take it anymore. So and I started my piano lessons. And one of the things on the right is an old box that sits on my dresser at home. In fact, on the dresser in that picture, it used to be a box that, of course, they used it for gloves, just as it says there. Above that is a plate rack in my living room showing some of the English china that I have purchased and put in my home. Here are different phases of my life, I guess you'd say, taken at different time periods. On the left is when I was teaching, and in the middle there, I don't know when that was, sometime in the teaching era, and also on the right would probably be when I was teaching too. And we finally come to a close with my old wagon here found on the farm, in the barn. Again, everything's in the barn, and with a bunch of flowers. I thought was a nice picture for an ending, showing my backyard of the old homestead. And thank you so much for listening to my story.